right, hello and welcome everybody to the third rubber match tier list and the first one that doesn't have anything to do with video games. Today I'm taking a look at MLB City Connect jerseys, specifically those that have been worn in 2025. I know that we've had a few years of this going on now since Nike took over jerseys for the MLB. But I just thought it'd be a fun thing with the playoffs going on to take a look at what all the teams had to offer for this promotion this season and point out which jerseys I found to be the best. I will preface this by saying I generally don't like this promotion. I think that most of these jerseys haven't really panned out and been the best additions to their team's jersey lineups. But with that said, there have certainly been some real hits in the few years that they've done this, and I thought it'd be fun to take a look at all these jerseys and see which ones stand out and which ones stand out as being awful. But we'll start off with the Arizona Diamondbacks and their Serpientes jersey right here. This is replaced probably my favorite City Connect jersey of all time before this, which also prominently featured the Serpientes nickname, but instead was kind of on this desert sand top and also featured the same color pants. Thought that was a very clean uniform. But this I really like as well. You know, this clearly pays tribute to the original era of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Of course, which saw them win the 2001 World Series. It's an era and a color scheme that I feel like every baseball fan likes, especially those that are around my age of being almost 30 and, you really grew up with those kind of color schemes being prominent in sports. And the Diamondbacks are among those teams, and this jersey, clearly pays tribute to that. My one question is, I feel like it's very clear that this color scheme is preferred by both MLB fans and Diamondbacks fans in particular. I do wonder why it just isn't revived entirely, but this jersey's solid. I'll put this in the A tier. I do like this one quite a bit. Next, we have the Colorado Rockies, another NL West team, and once again, they're coming from the bow of having a new jersey replacing one of my favorite City Connect jerseys. They previously had the one that very obviously was paying tribute to the Colorado license plate. You had Colorado written in the same font with, the shape of the Rocky Mountains, mostly green, fading into the white on top. It was a really cool look, and I think really did a great job at making it very clear that it was paying tribute in honoring Colorado. But this jersey actually does the same as well. It gives you the retro pullover look, which in this case I think is nice for a team that doesn't really have much to, pull upon as far as throwback jerseys go, with them being established in 1993. They've essentially had the same jerseys and color scheme their entire existence. But this is cool, and I also like how it takes on what we've seen from the Utah Jazz, and we've seen it from the Denver Nuggets as well, playing into that, sunburst, Mountain West, sunset kind of theme. I think it's very clear that that's what they're going for. And I also think it's cool because, a big part of a Denver summer is seeing that sunset from Coors Field. I think it's cool to, kind of clearly pay tribute to that and then also still feature the Rockies logo on there. I like this a lot. Put this in the A tier, actually above the Diamondbacks one. But we will stay in the NL West, and we have the San Francisco Giants next. This one's an interesting one. Doesn't stray at all from the black and orange general Giants color scheme. This jersey reminds me quite a bit of what we saw from the NBA City Edition jerseys a few years back from the Brooklyn Nets when they had Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden, I believe in 2021. I had those uniforms that kind of had a very similar font, looked like it was clearly, taking on that graffiti art style. This one does the same. I do like how on the edges of the sleeves you do have, kind of a gradient thing going on. But this jersey doesn't really just stand out to me all that much. I feel like there's no obvious tribute to San Francisco on there. It doesn't really stray from the color scheme, which is fine. I just feel like it's a safe, maybe a bit on the lazy side of a jersey for the Giants, but certainly a better one than some of the ones we'll come across here. Put that in C tier for now. Next, we have the Chicago White Sox, and this is another case of replacing one of the better City Connect jerseys prior to this. They used to have that black pinstripe one that said Southside. It said the Shy on the hat, was very popular among White Sox fans. And I felt like it was cool that, it paid explicit tribute to being on the South Side, leaning into that regional identity that they had. Here, this looks like a giveaway night jersey on Chicago Bulls night at Rate Field. I mean, this is really a low effort jersey if you're asking me. I feel like there's so many things to pull upon and to play with being a Chicago team, and I feel like we've seen that in some other jerseys over the years, even with some of the City Edition Bulls jerseys that they've had. But this just looks like a Bulls night giveaway. I'm sure if you're a Bulls fan, it's cool. It kind of has that reverse look of the black pinstripe jerseys that the Bulls wore in the 90s. But other than that, I feel like there's just so many different places to go. I mean, you had the old red, white, and blue color scheme that the White Sox used to use in the 70s and 80s is very popular among fans. Could have done a modern take on that. Just a lot of different directions, and instead I feel like they just took a shortcut and they're like, oh, this pleases 2 of the 5 fan bases in the city. We'll go with that. Really not a good one. Put that in the D tier. Not a fan of that jersey. Next, we have the Astros. I don't have too much to say about this one. This does replace another solid City Connect jersey. They had that dark blue and orange one that said Space City on it. This one is just a very obvious nod to a throwback era. Of course, you're looking at kind of like a hybrid. You have the same Astros font that we saw in the late Astrodome days in the late 90s, but also that star that very prominently featured once you got to the 2000s, once they moved to what is now Daikon Field. A solid jersey, solid addition to the Houston jersey lineup, but I think it didn't really go out of the box at all. Feels like a safe choice, one that people are going to like, which is certainly better than a lot of these jerseys that I feel like are easy not to like. But, just safe, and I feel like not really memorable overall, but still solid. It'll go in my B tier. But next, we're coming across the first, truly bad jersey, and that is the Dodgers. And it's unfortunate because not only are the Dodgers a premier franchise in the sport, one that is, especially right now, kind of considered to be the pinnacle of baseball success, they also have excellent jerseys. I mean, you're looking at their home jersey. It's iconic, that white and blue. Their road jerseys, I think, are among the best in baseball, particularly their alternate road jersey that says Los Angeles instead of Dodgers. But this jersey just looks like a workout shirt that you would find at a Goodwill. I mean, there's so many things wrong with it, whether the number and the very awkward location above Los Angeles, and then, of course, the name below the number. This looks awful when it's done in the NBA. I don't know why it was thought to be a good idea to do it to the MLB, let alone, to a team like the Dodgers that I feel like has had, a very kind of strict setting for what their jerseys are going to be. There hasn't been much variation in the Dodgers jerseys over the years. And then for this to just be added into the rotation, I guess his somewhat off-white appearance, it does redeem it a little bit, but I mean that doesn't offset anything that makes this jersey awful. I feel like this is just insanely lazy, and there's just so many different things you could do, and instead it's just a workout shirt that says Los Angeles on it. It's going to go in the F tier. Next, we have the Brew Crew jersey, the Milwaukee Brewers powder blue jersey. This is solid. I've always been a fan of this, and I think it's worth noting that the Brewers have always kind of leaned into nostalgia, perhaps a bit more than some other clubs, even during the 2000s and 2010s when they had that, navy blue and gold color scheme. I always had those Friday night home games where you would bring out, the white jerseys with the blue pinstripes. That were used a lot earlier on in the Brewers franchise history, or were at least inspired by that. And I think this is a really cool hybrid of that, where it's clearly inspired by the retro powder blue era that the Brewers had, but it also has that modern take where you're using the nickname that the team has gone by for very many years and kind of a more modern font. I think it's solid. I think it's a good mix of both paying tribute to the old and new with this jersey. I think it's kind of relatively safe in a way. Nothing too off the wall, but did a good job with it. And put that in the A tier. Next, we have the Nationals. This one I'm not the biggest fan of. You kind of have a bit more of a dull kind of blue gray color dominating here with this jersey. From a distance, at least looking at it, looking at it on this tier list, it almost looks like like a golf polo, or like it could be. And I feel like my biggest complaint about this jersey is that the block DC, that features prominently on the front, is really no different than the DC that the Nationals used early on after their initial relocation to Washington in the mid 2000s. I mean, it just kind of looks like a rehashed version of those alternate jerseys on a more bland color scheme. Once again, Washington, D.C., I feel like there's plenty of different directions you could go to look for an influence for like a true, city jersey. I feel like the old cherry blossom jerseys did a great job at that. I honestly would have been fine with just a different take on a cherry blossom jersey instead of something that, really just seems devoid of any action. Not one stood out to me. This is also, gonna go in the D tier. And yeah, the Guardians, like, come on. Why are scoreboard abbreviations being used on the front of jerseys? I mean, I noticed that this kind of began with the Phoenix Suns maybe, 15, close to 20 years ago at this point in the NBA. And maybe it works a bit better there, but there's just no reason to be taking that approach in the MLB. No stray from the color scheme. Not really any obvious indication of what is Cleveland inspired by this jersey. And once again, for a franchise that has solid regular jerseys, I mean, this is not one that's worth adding to the jersey repertoire, especially when they have another alternate jersey that's incredibly lazy, just has the Cap logo, sitting on the front, and that's it. I mean, we got to be doing a bit more with these. This is not good. I was also going to go in the F tier. The Mets does seem like kind of in that same category, but I would actually disagree. I do kind of like this jersey. I like that, it does kind of pay tribute more to like the old baseball days where you would see gray feature very prominently and you'd have the pinstripes. The NYC and the font that it's in also kind of gives you that old-timey feeling, which is solid for the Mets, as they don't have that kind of history that the Yankees do, as being established in the early 60s. So I think it's cool to have kind of like a weird semi-faux-back uniform that's minimalist but well executed. Like, a seasoned baseball fan is going to know what this is going after, and I think it does a decent job in that regard. With that said, I think with the vibrant color scheme that the Mets have, you could have gotten a lot more creative with how to execute this one. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in the upper C tier. I think definitely better than the Giants jersey, but I don't know if I like it on the same echelon that I do those throwback Astros jerseys. And speaking of throwbacks, we got the Los Angeles / Anaheim / California Angels next. Another AL West team coming into it. And once again, this is like the Astros, a safe jersey, clearly a throwback. Loved the off-white look. Loved the previous jerseys that kind of took this model. And yeah, it's a solid jersey, but there's really nothing that new about it. So don't have too much to say. Going to put it in the B tier. I feel like you, of course, could have been a bit more creative, but certainly could have been much, much worse. I don't think there's going to be anybody upset about the off-white, old-style Angels jerseys. Next, we have one of the most popular, and I do have to jump on the bandwagon on this. I agree with the masses on the San Diego Padres jersey being absolutely amazing. It sucks that it will not be coming back in 2025, but this is an example of, rolling the dice with jersey design and getting it right. And I feel like we see it go wrong so many times, and I know that there's some people out there that don't like this jersey. But still, I feel like it's a really, really cool mix of all of the vibrant colors being thrown in at once. They somehow don't go together, but do somehow also have incredible harmony with one another. And I think the coolest thing about taking this jersey approach for the Padres specifically is that they, probably have one of the more boring, I don't want to say boring, because I personally don't find it boring because it's different, but I guess, one of the more conventionally drab color schemes you can come across in professional sports. Brown is not a very common pro sports team color, but it features very prominently for the Padres, and instead on this jersey they go completely the opposite direction. Lots of vibrancy, paying tribute to that mid to late 90s era where this was in across all of sports. And it looks really good. It screams West Coast. And I think it's a really solid jersey that you're going to be seeing at Petco Park for years to come. Going to put that in the S tier. Great job with that one. Next, we have the Blue Jays. This is another kind of weird, modern, retro hybrid one. You definitely see some influence from that bulky Blue Jays uniforms era of the late 90s and early 2000s that I personally wasn't the biggest fan of. But also certainly a modern take, and you definitely see that with the blue on black, which has gotten bigger in recent years. The red outline numbers, kind of the skyline embedded into the jersey font on the front. This is a cool jersey, but as you could probably tell, it's tough to really tell everything that's going on. But seeing it in action, I do think it's solid. I feel like black jerseys are kind of overused across sports. This was a solid way to re-implement it into the rotation for the Blue Jays, who did use one, in the era after that bulky era, that 2004 to 2011, 2012 era, where it was just Jays on the front of the jersey and they had black alternates. I think it's cool to kind of combine all of those elements into one. I put this a step above the throwbacks, but I'm not quite in the A tier, so I'll go high B tier with that one. Next, Tampa Bay Rays / Devil Rays. Not much to say about this one. This is stellar. Everybody loves the old Devil Rays color scheme and jerseys. This is, a really good, updated, modern rethink of what those jerseys used to look like, particularly the black ones. Love the electric green font on the back and the trim on the sleeves. This is an excellent jersey through and through. Obviously, they could have gotten a bit more creative since it is just so clearly taken from the Devil Rays style. But that is the only drawback on it. This is an excellent jersey. Put this probably right there in the A tier. Back to another horrible one in the Baltimore Orioles. Once again, for a historic franchise that has had a pretty high standard set for their uniforms, which have followed the same color scheme and not really varied much over the years. This uniform follows the same color scheme and is just the laziest, most minimalist possible version of it. Like the Dodgers one, this looks like a workout shirt. Why is this being worn an MLB game when the vast majority of minor league uniforms are more interesting and have more going on? And that's not to say that you can't do a minimalist jersey well. I even think that Mets jersey is pretty solid, but to just have the city's name in block font and expect that to be something that people latch onto is mind-boggling. This is an atrocious jersey, also in the F tier. Next, we have the Liberty Bell gradient-inspired Phillies jersey. It says Philly on it. One of those City Connect jerseys that is just a complete departure from the team's existing color scheme, which I think is fine. I, for example, think the Red Sox did a pretty good job with that. Leaning into the city's colors and the Boston Marathon history with their previous City Connect jersey. This one, I just feel like the connection isn't as obvious, and it does just kind of look like a weird, kind of modern, off the cuff jersey that you would maybe design in a video game. Not my least favorite, but also not one that I feel like really stands out. And if I were a Phillies fan, it wouldn't be a jersey that I'd be rushing to own myself. Gonna put that one in the C tier. I won't call it lazy because it is so different, but I just don't feel like it was executed very well, especially once again for a team that has really not switched up their mantra on uniforms much over the course of the past few decades. Next, another bad one. It's the Tigers Motor City, just going with the city's nickname on the front of the jersey. This one I would say is maybe a step above the Cleveland, the Dodgers, and the Baltimore that you see in the F tier, just because you at least do have some blue and black variation on the jersey. Maybe it is a subtle nod to the tiger stripes, but yeah, this is once again just like a lazy workout shirt looking jersey that I don't know why we're seeing it in MLB games when the rest of the jerseys are, including the rest of the alternate jerseys, are typically so much better. And that message really extends to these next two, these Royals and Twins jerseys. Man, what a disaster for the AL Central and the City Connect this year. These Royals jerseys, I mean, I think the Royals across the board have taken a real step back in their jerseys, abandoning the cursive font on the away jerseys in favor of the black lettering. I think looks very goofy. And this, once again, this just looks like an AI generated alternate KC logo. You slap it on the front of the jersey, you darken the shade of blue a little bit. It's just like a depressing minimalist version of the bright and vibrant Royals jerseys. Like, this jersey is to the Royals jerseys as modern gray McDonald's are to the vibrant yellow and red McDonald's that my generation grew up with. Yeah, just come on. This is also going in the F tier. And the Twins, I mean, you just slightly adjust, the shade of blue from what you're usually using. You add an abbreviation, you slap it on the front, you call it a day. This, like the DC one, looks like a golf shirt, but it feels like it took even less effort. Yeah, come on. Awful jersey. And I feel like the Twins have gone a mostly questionable direction with their new jerseys the past couple of years, but the off-white Twin Cities alternate is one of the better jerseys in baseball, and it's a shame that they couldn't reach into, that creative headspace to come up with a more captivating City Connect jersey for this year. But at least we have something to freshen our palette, and that's the Seattle Mariners with their absolutely excellent City Connect uniforms. These are paired with black pants, and I feel like the look is just absolutely spectacular. Love the pullover. Love how it's, once again, very, very clearly, paying tribute to that very early era in Mariners baseball. As much as the modern color scheme is beloved, I think it's really cool to, see this throwback look that's executed across the board, whether it be from the black pants or the font that you see, or the all lowercase in the Seattle. This is really a through and through an excellent jersey. You can also put that in the S tier. Next we have the Marlins. Yeah, I think this is a solid jersey. It does replace what I also thought was a solidly above average City Connect jersey in their previous red ones that I feel like very clearly pay tribute to the city's Cuban heritage. Once again, you don't really have to guess or wonder what this is going for. We've seen it with the Miami Heat jerseys that I think have been among the best of the City Edition jerseys in the NBA. You're going after the Miami Vice theme from the 1980s, and this looks really nice. I feel like the font is really good. It looks cinematic. I love how the colors change throughout the jersey. The pink trim on the sleeves is well executed. It's just, it's not the most creative, but it's a well executed version, and everybody is going to know what they're going for. This is also going to go up in the A tier, kind of similar to the Brewers. It's a similar jersey in that regard, where it may not be the most creative, but it's a really solid execution of what they were trying to go after. Next, we have the Texas Rangers coming in at this off-white jersey with the TR on one side and the number on the other. This one is kind of hit or miss in my mind, but I do think it's more of a hit. I love how the font on both the numbers and the letters on the jersey really give you that old Western style Texas feel. I think the off-white is a great mix with that. We haven't really seen the Rangers go that direction with their color scheme, and I feel like it's a well executed departure from all of that. May not be the wildest or the most creative, but I do think one of the better City Connect jerseys. I'll put this in the upper B tier, because at least you could read what is on this jersey compared to the Blue Jays jersey. Another throwback in the Atlanta Braves. This is a solid throwback. I love this white and blue color scheme, but once again, a safe jersey that you know is going to be a solid addition to the lineup without reinventing the wheel. That's going to go in the B tier for me. Next, the Cardinals. For as much of a lazy and obvious jersey as this is, I think it's solid. I think it's always been wild that the Cardinals never had like a regular red jersey. And once again, it's obvious what they're going for, paying tribute to the city, going with the nickname on the front, embracing the red seats in the ballpark, the primarily red color scheme that the team has. I feel like it makes sense for them to have a red alternate jersey. And I feel like, this is a really solid, basic way to go with it. I'm going to put this in the upper B tier as well. Staying in the NL Central, next we have the Cincinnati Reds with another lazy jersey. It just has a basic nickname of the city on the front and not much else. I will say the black and red I do think looks good for the Reds. I did like as a kid when they used to, implement the black a lot more with the vest jerseys, and this does kind of invoke a little bit of that, but the black lettering and just the minimalist feel that the jersey has is not among my favorite. I don't think it's quite as bad as this bunch, but not a good one. That's going to go in the D tier. I also apologize for the extra noise coming in. I have leaf blowers right outside the apartment at the moment, but doing my best to battle through it. As we're right about to finish up at the end here, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates with their very basic gold jersey of the city abbreviation on the front. I like the gold jerseys from the Pirates. I think this is something that they should implement more of, but I just feel like they should look a bit more creative and have a bit more going on than just, an abbreviation of the city that isn't even the one used on scoreboards, or I believe the airport either. So just this kind of a lazy, weird jersey. I don't think outwardly offensive like these, but in that same tier of the Reds one. Just they got one thing right and everything else wrong with it. The Red Sox, second to last one on this list. I like these. As I mentioned earlier, this replaced the City Connect jersey that I did think was pretty solid. Looking back at the ones that they had that were kind of almost UCLA Bruins colors that, were paying tribute to the Boston Marathon. This one, you look at it and you know instantly what it's going for if you're a baseball fan. That green monster green at Fenway. I think it was cool for them to embrace something about the franchise that didn't have to be beholden to the color scheme that everybody is used to. Obviously, you gotta love the Red Sox uniforms. Are among the most iconic in baseball, but I think it was really cool that, they were able to go a different direction with the colors, but for it to still be unapologetically Red Sox. And I feel like the lettering on the front could be a bit more exciting, could have a bit more going on. Maybe doesn't have to be flat out block lettering, but I don't think there has to be too much more, and I think they nailed the color of this jersey. So I'm also going to put this up in the A tier. And then finally, we'll close it out. This wasn't intentional, it just happened to be how the tier list was organized, but we'll close it out with my team in the Chicago Cubs. This City Connect jersey, I don't feel like it's my favorite, but I also feel like it's a solid improvement over what we saw with their previous City Connect jerseys in the Wrigleyville jerseys that they used to wear. I was just not really a big fan of those. I felt like those were a bit more on the lazy side. That dark blue, and you had the black lettering that was maybe angled a little bit, but nothing really else. And outside of saying Wrigleyville, they didn't really have much of an obvious tribute to Chicago. This goes maybe a bit of a step further. You have the powder blue jerseys, which I do feel like a lot of fans are nostalgic of, which the Cubs did used to wear a lot in the 70s, particularly as part of their road uniforms, as many teams did at that time. I also really like the guitar pick shoulder patch that you have that says Chicago on it. Cool to, kind of be honoring the Chicago blues and jazz scene that has, paid a big part to the city's culture. And it stays faithful to what a team's color scheme and overall jersey design has been about. I do feel like it's one of the safer ones, but a solid jersey and a step up, one of the rare steps up improvements that we've seen from City Connect to City Connect. So I think it's a good one. I'll put it probably, right around where I put the Cardinals at there in the upper B tier. But that is all I got. That's a look at how I would rank the City Connect jerseys from 2025. Once again, I'd like to apologize for the extra noise. Thank you for bearing with me if you did at all. If you didn't want to bear with me, though, I have the link to the story on my website, which will have a picture of this tier list and a link to the video. I'll have that in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll look to be back with more soon.